Hello everyone. So this week we're going to be doing chapter 2 from our textbook, Colonization and Conflicts 1580 to 1860. So this chapter, I believe it has three learning objectives. So I kind of broke down this introduction to give you a little bit about those learning objectives. So chapter 2, it does discuss the break from the Catholic Church. So when we're talking about Europe, we're talking about this part of the world, right? Like the first Christian church that the prophet Jesus is going to establish is known as the Catholic Church. And for the most part, the Catholic Church is the only Christian church for a long time. There are a couple of breakaways from the Catholic Church, but none that really have a lasting impact until we get to the year 1517. So in 1517, we have this break, and it happens because of Martin Luther. And you'll learn about him. He's a monk, he's a scholar, and what he does is he is protesting against the Catholic Church. So look here at the word Protestant, and right there the root word is protest, right? So we're protesting something. So he's protesting what they're doing within the Catholic Church, and he wants to reform, he wants to change things within the Catholic Church. And so when he does, and around the same time, there's also people in Europe that are kind of at the same time, they're breaking away from the Catholic Church too. There's some in Switzerland, there's some in Germany. And so this break happens, and in reaction to that, the Catholic Church is going to react, and they're like, oh my gosh, we're losing power, we're losing people. What can we do in response to this? And so they initiate the Counter-Reformation to try to restore faith in the Catholic Church. So when you're going through and like the colonies, part of that was for religious freedom, but also think about religions that have been persecuted over the centuries. I think every major religion that we study about at some point is persecuted, right? You have the Jews that are persecuted in like Egypt. So at this point in history, in the 1500s, the 1600s, what's really important is to know, okay, which monarch, which ruler, what religion do they follow? Are they Catholic? If they are, they're probably going to persecute, and that means we're going to kill, we're going to run out of town, we're going to close businesses that are owned by people who are Protestants. They're still Christians, but maybe they're Lutheran, or they're Puritan, or they're Anglican. We're going to close all their businesses, run them out of town, and we might even resort to killing them because we don't agree with them and their religion. And vice versa, if you have a Protestant leader, a Protestant monarch who's maybe part of the Anglican Church, again, still Christian, they might run all the Catholics, the other Christians, out of town because they don't believe in the same religious beliefs that they have. So it's really important to note, okay, this monarch is Catholic, Protestants are not going to be liked. This monarch is Protestant, Catholics are going to be hated. So when we start talking about King Henry VIII, and we talk about Queen Elizabeth and James I, it goes back and forth between being Protestant and being Catholic, and who is leaving England and who is coming, and other parts of Europe too, not just England, but who's leaving parts of Europe and coming to establish colonies, and those colonies are going to follow whichever religious beliefs that they have as well. It's really important to take note of religion, how much religion is playing into this. Although we're, for the most part, Christians, they're still fighting amongst each other. So look at that. It also discusses the different types of labor introduced into the colonies. So the first Africans, which is so interesting to me because when we think of Africans coming to the colonies, coming to the Americas, whether they're coming to North, Central, or South America, usually we think of them as being enslaved, and you're not incorrect in thinking that. The first couple of hundred, even like up to a couple of thousand Africans that are introduced to the North America, to the colonies, they're actually going to be indentured servants, and so that means they serve out their time period, and then at the end of that servitude, they're set free. They're given land, they can own a business, they can move freely in and out of the colonies. There's really no distinction in the color of their skin, their race just yet. Not long after that, about 2 decades after that, though, there is a distinction, and race will become tied to slavery. And when we start thinking about slaves in America, we only think about people of color. And for the most part, those people of color are coming from Africa. But that's not to say that Native Americans were not also enslaved. So there's that different type of servitude. Indentured servitude was the preferred method of servitude in the first few decades. Then we'll slowly move from having your white, black, indentured servants to having just slaves being the only form of servitude. Apprenticeship is also a form of labor where you come and you work for free and you're learning a trade, you're learning the business, and then eventually, after a few years of your apprenticeship, you're going to go out on your own. Also, look at the Pilgrims and the Puritans and their influence in the British colonies and their religious beliefs, what they bring to the colonies. Also, the diseases that they bring to the indigenous peoples that they come into contact with. At first, we do have Native Americans and colonists a little wary of each other. At some point, they do start to, like, colonists rely very heavily on natives to get through some really harsh winters. But then those colonists are going to turn on Native Americans and see, as you're reading, if you can figure out why that relationship disintegrates and breaks down and walls or literally fences are put up between natives and colonists, why that happens. So those are the three major things to really look for in this chapter. And then there's also like caveats. There's these really cool stories about like Anne Hutchinson and how she breaks from tradition. She's this very outspoken religious female leader in the colonies, which was a no-no because in the colonies we follow a patriarchy. We follow men, and men are the head of the household. So she kind of broke the norm. She would be later on maybe even classified as a witch, a heretic, because of her strong religious beliefs. So there's some cool stories that are mixed into this chapter as well. Take your time reading it. You've got a couple primary, secondary sources to look over this week, and you also have the map quiz to go along with that.